In Chapter 3, we're going to look at the manager's changing work environment and ethical responsibilities. So we're going to take a little bit of a deeper dive into the ethics that I mentioned in Chapter 1's PowerPoint. The triple bottom line is concerned with a company's ability to address people, planet, and profit, which are known as the 3 Ps. This measures an organization's social, environmental, and financial performance. Success on addressing the triple bottom line can be measured through a social audit. This is a systematic assessment of a company's performance in implementing socially responsible programs. In this view of company performance, an organization has a responsibility to its employees as well as the wider community, which addresses the people part of the triple bottom line. A company is also committed to sustainable and green environmental practices, which addresses the planet part, and it includes the cost of pollution, worker displacement, and other factors in its financial calculations, which is looking at the profit aspect of the triple bottom line. These are matters that rank high in the minds of many today's consumers. This slide shows a graphic of the community of stakeholders. Now, there are a couple of things to recognize about this slide. When we talk about stakeholders, that is anybody or anything that has a stake in or an interest in that company existing. Stakeholders are things that can be harmed or helped because of the existence of the company and its actions. As you can see in this slide, the community of stakeholders are broken down between the general environment, the task environment, and internal stakeholders. Internal stakeholders consist, as you can see, of employees, owners, and the board of directors, for example. Owners are all the people that claim the organization as their legal property. The board of directors are members elected by the stockholders to see that the company is being run according to their interest. And if we look at the external stakeholders, these also greatly affect the organization. The task environment consists of 11 groups that can also impact the organization. And finally, the general environment refers to the macro environment. One thing to remember about the macro environment are these are items that are outside the direct control of the company. These include things such as economic forces, for example, are we in a recession or is it in an expansion time for the economy? Technology forces, how fast is technology changing? Sociocultural forces, which address trends in society. Demographic forces, political and legal forces, and then international forces. An ethical dilemma is a situation in which you have to decide whether to pursue a course of action that may benefit you or your organization, but that may be unethical or even illegal. Solving ethical dilemmas is an important skill, according to a recent study. An investigation of 400 senior executives that was presented in your textbook and 455 college students revealed that 62% of the students believe they were very well prepared to deal with ethical judgments, whereas only 30% of executives see students as prepared. This is a very important gap. An example of an ethical dilemma that I use with my traditional undergrad students is I would ask them, is it okay if you murder somebody? And they say, no, of course it's not okay. And then I ask them if they come home and they see somebody hurting a family member or a friend, and they have a gun and they're going to kill that family member or friend, is it okay then to harm the other individual? And their answer almost always changes to yes. This is an example of an ethical dilemma. Ethics are defined as the standards of right and wrong that influence behavior, and it's important to realize that they may vary among countries and cultures. Values are relatively permanent and deeply held underlying beliefs and attitudes that help determine and guide a person's behavior. Let's think about ways in which ethics can differ. People rely on values to influence their ethical behavior. This means that some behavior may be viewed as ethical by some, but unethical by others. Can you see why some doctors may believe that their attendance at a pharmaceutical presentation with a top dollar supplier might be a useful educational experience, while at the same time, other doctors may believe that it is a bribe. Defining ethical behavior depends a lot on a person's value system. Organizations may have two value systems that conflict. One is a value system stressing financial performance, and the other one is a value system stressing cohesion and solidarity in employee relationships. For example, if you have a company that has a very team-centered approach, such as the Container Store, and they very much stress cohesion and solidarity in employee relationships, and let's say that company then introduces an incentive plan for approaching customers first and selling them most. See how that value system stressing financial performance may interfere with the team cohesion that occurs prior to the introduction of that system. There are 4 approaches to deciding ethical dilemmas. The first one is the utilitarian approach. This is guided by what will result in the greatest good for the greatest number of people. It's often associated with financial performance. Do you believe that decisions should be guided by what will result in the greatest good for the greatest number of people? I want you to think about in what ways this can be problematic for the organization to adhere to. For example, firing thousands of employees may improve the bottom line and provide immediate benefit for stockholders. However, this action may damage workforce morale and lead to the loss of employees with experience and skills. The individual approach is guided by what will result in the individual's best long-term interest, which ultimately is in everyone's self-interest. This assumes that people will act ethically in the short run to avoid harm in the long run, but the flaw here is that one person's short-term gain may not be good for everyone in the long term. An example is the manager of an agricultural business that puts chemical fertilizer on the crops every year will benefit by a higher yield in their crops, but the fishing industries downstream could ultimately suffer if chemical runoff reduces the number of fish. In the moral rights approach, this is when someone is guided by the respect for the fundamental rights of human beings, the right to life, liberty, privacy, health, safety, and due process. For example, the U.S. Constitution's Bill of Rights is an example of the moral rights approach. Another example is the difficulty is when the rights are in conflict, such as an employer and employee rights. Should employees on the job have guarantee of privacy? Actually, it is legal for employers to listen to business phone calls and monitor all non-spoken personnel communications. And finally, there is the justice approach. This approach is guided by respect for impartial standards of fairness and equity. Policies administered impartially and fairly regardless of gender, age, sexual orientation, and the like. In this approach, fairness can often be an issue. Employees may be resentful when a corporation's CEO is paid a salary and bonus worth hundreds of times more than what they receive, even when the company is performing poorly. As I mentioned previously, white-collar crime in business has increased a lot, and because of that, there are now different laws and regulations in place. The Sarbanes-Oxley Reform Act is one of them. So let's define what white-collar crime is. This is illegal trading, Ponzi schemes, and other white-collar crimes that dominated the headlines in the early 21st century. The Sarbanes-Oxley Act of 2002 established requirements for proper financial record keeping for public companies. Penalties of as much as 25 years in prison for noncompliance exist under this act, and it's also increased the amount of paperwork and the cost of public companies reporting. The SOX, which is what the Sarbanes-Oxley Reform Act is known as, SOX, it requires a company's CEO and CFO to personally certify the organization's financial reports. It prohibits them from taking personal loans and lines of credit, and it makes them reimburse the organization for bonuses and stock options when required by restatement of corporate profits. It also requires the company to have established procedures and guidelines for audit committees. As a manager, you will have social responsibilities, which include the manager's duty to take action that will benefit the interest of society as well as the organization. Corporate social responsibility is the notion that corporations are expected to go above and beyond following the law and making a profit. It's interesting because it is very much a debate right now on whether corporations really have corporate social responsibility. One side argues that the only social responsibility businesses have is to make a profit because then everybody benefits. Others say no, they need to also give back to their communities in different ways beyond just making a profit. There are different types of social responsibilities. The first one is sustainability. This is economic development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. Today, sustainability is also called going green, and it has entered the business mainstream, where sustainability programs are producing not only environmental benefits, but also cost savings, revenue growth, and competitive advantages. Natural capital is another type of social responsibility. This is the value of natural resources such as topsoil, air, water, and genetic diversity, which humans depend on. This quote from Stanford University ecologist Gretchen Daly says, "We're driving natural capital to its lowest levels ever in human history. According to this view, we are approaching the planet's limitations, with human activity threatened to exceed the Earth's capacity to generate resources and absorb our waste. Sustainability and the business of going green hopes to reverse this trend." In 2016 poll, 70% of Americans believe climate change causes extreme weather and a rise in the sea level. Another type of social responsibility is philanthropy. This is making charitable donations to benefit humankind. Andrew Carnegie once said, "He who dies rich dies thus disgraced." 136 billionaires have joined Bill and Melinda Gates in the Giving Pledge, which is a commitment to dedicate a majority of their wealth to philanthropy. This concludes Chapter 3. Please don't hesitate to reach out and let me know if you have any questions.